Welcome to the Bible for Kids podcast with your hosts, best-selling children's author Amy Parker and author and co-creator of VeggieTales, Mike Naraki. If instilling biblical values in kids is important to you, this podcast will help give you the resources, wisdom, and hope to do just that. Now let's join our hosts, Amy and Mike, for this week's episode.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Bible for Kids podcast. I'm Mike Naraki.
And I'm Amy Parker.
And today we have two of the masterminds behind the Action Bible, a super successful graphic Bible for kids. We're going to talk to Michelle and Sergio in just a minute, but first...
We like to start every episode of the Bible for Kids podcast with a Bible verse. And today's verse is from 1 John 2, 5 through 6. By this we may know that we are in him. Whoever says he abides in him ought to walk in the same way in which he walked. And of course, the him there is Jesus.
That's right. So Michelle Baird serves at David C. Cook as principal strategist, leading the marketing team. One of her greatest joys is working strategically to create opportunities and resources for kids to know and love Jesus more. Michelle understands from hands-on experience how to equip and encourage ministry leaders and parents alike. She has served as a Sunday school teacher and children's church volunteer for more than 25 years and is mom to two young adult sons.
And Sergio Cariello studied at the Word of Life Bible Institute in Brazil and New York, as well as the Kubert School of Cartooning in New York. He drew superheroes for Marvel and DC Comics and served as an instructor at the Kubert School. Sergio has spent more than a decade bringing the Bible to life for children and adults around the world.
Michelle and Sergio, welcome to the Bible for Kids.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you, Mike and Amy.
Oh, thank you. And we're in this new Zoom world, so we're going to go with the technology here. So
Exactly.
So the Action Bible has had a pretty phenomenal success by any standard. In 10 years, it sold more than 85 million units, 85 million, holy smokes. Mm-hmm. And it's been translated into 27 languages with 10 to 15 more translations in the works. So Michelle, if we can start with you, can you tell us a little bit about how this Bible came to be? Actually, would you just tell us the secret formula to selling 85 million books?
Yeah, please.
Well, thank you guys. And again, what a pleasure to be here. So I think to really just say, so I've been at David C. Cook 5 years, and of course, the Action Bible has been around for 10. So starting at Cook, it was a privilege to just get to meet Sergio and start working on the project. But Mike, I'll tell you, I think the 85 million it comes to that this project and this resource has global impact. That is literally around the world. Yeah. And then when you take the whole, just the whole product line, which, maybe we can get to later, it's really just more about the impact, just of the entire project. So how it really started, and this is actually really kind of fun because it's part of Sergio's story, that 10 years ago or so, they had talked about taking the picture Bible, which had also been a huge bestseller, which by the way, is still in print. Mm-hmm. And just kind of reinventing it and expanding it. And they were looking for an illustrator to really do that and kind of take it into what I'll say, I guess, kind of a next generation model with art and things like that.
Right.
Well, lo and behold, as the story goes, they found Sergio. And honestly, as they say, the rest is kind of history, just with the way he was so impacted by wanting to join the project and go from there. So
yeah, well, that's so cool, and I will say, having done Bible stories for children for years, when you read the actual Bible, it is much more PG-13 and above, just really the text of the Bible is so so adult in many cases, and it's great to see that relate in the art as well. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And what I will say, just to add, is that, the target really was kind of this 8 to 12-year-old, the tween age Bible engagement for tweens. But I think you just hit on it. One of the biggest surprises, and maybe not so much of a surprise, was that the impact it has had for all ages. Okay. Mm-hmm. Adults, prisoners. Sergio gets letters all the time from prisoners who, exactly. We have, beautiful stories of a home where high functioning autistic you know, adults with autism live, they do a Bible study around the Action Bible.
Yeah.
So the impact, you see what I mean? It's huge, the engagement level, because it speaks the global language.
Right. Yeah,
God's visual in
Yeah.
God's redemptive story.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, and so getting into that, one of the most unique features of the Action Bible is the powerful comic style illustrations. And so, Sergio, tell us, did you read comics as a child? And were they in, I know there's a Brazilian background there, were they in English or Portuguese?
Yes, I did have the comics when I was a kid. We had the translated comics to Portuguese. So if I ever wanted to read the original English version, I would go to the airport in my house and then see the current as in America, what the storyline would be, because we were a few years behind back then. Nowadays, everything is faster, but back then when I was a kid, they collected comics into a supplement with 3 or 4 issues in one cover. So it's quite different than the American comics of the day back then. But we had all the superheroes just like America would have, but black and white and in Portuguese, translated, yes.
I remember my wife grew up as a neighbor of yours in Colombia, in Bogota, Colombia. And she tells me stories of, watching, the Flintstones and, Bugs Bunny, all in Spanish, just, so she was so used to those characters in Spanish, and now living in the States, getting to know them again in English translations. So
yes.
it's so neat to know how those characters can translate across cultures and across languages.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I remember you went to TV now. So the TV, we had the dubbed in Portuguese. I don't know how old they were, the cartoons, as opposed to the actual airing in America. But we also had that as a kid, different voices for different actors. Like Lee Major's $6 Million Man, his voice was much deeper. And when I came to America, I said, their voice is so different.
Yeah.
And all of these, I Dream of Jeannie or whoever.
Right. And I'd have my favorite for when VeggieTales was translated into other languages. I'd have my favorite, characters in each language, and my favorite Larry was the Japanese Larry.
Oh, I bet.
He just nailed Larry. He was
right.
great. So, Sergio, part of your career has involved drawing for Marvel and DC. So, how did that come about? And I do have one question for everyone, maybe an official poll: Iron Man or Batman? Who's your favorite?
Batman, for sure.
All right.
Sorry,
Okay.
Iron Man.
Iron Man. I'm with you, Amy. Iron Man all the way.
Yeah. Mike, you want to break the tie here?
Let me ask this. Why do you think Iron Man? Are you thinking of the movies, or did you ever read the comic book?
I'm thinking of Robert Downey Jr.
Okay, Amy.
That's totally unfair to the subject.
Well, and I have to go with Batman too, because Batman was the inspiration for Larry Boy, of course.
Oh, right, of course.
Yeah, so
but
regular
Batman
cucumber.
Batman is so brooding. He's just.
I'm Larry Boy.
Exactly. Okay, so Mike, you just made my day, because I did not know that about Larry Boy. And again, I have 2 grown sons, 22 and 24, and they grew up on VeggieTales. So thank you. Thank you, first of all.
Absolutely. He had the Larry Cave and the Larry Mobile and
right.
Alfred the butler and the whole thing. Yeah. So it was totally Batman. So I'm with Sergio.
I need to make a point, because since I'm a comic book artist, when you talk about comic book characters, I automatically think about comics. If you talk about movies, it's a total different game. Different game. So if you're talking about the Iron Man movie, we don't have much to compare, because the Avengers have been much greater than the DC adaptations of the comics into the Batman and characters from DC Comics, Warner Brothers. But if you're talking about comic books, that's where I'm coming from. And that's my mindset. When you talk about comic book characters, I do not think about movies.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about comics.
Right.
It's totally different.
Yeah, it is. It's just, it's just a different medium and a different translation. Of course, all of the, mythology is drawn from
It's
the
a
same
different
place.
sentiment of growing up, because when I was a kid, I read comics. We didn't have the movies.
Right.
So to me, in my mind, Batman is stronger than Iron Man because I drew Batman. I read Batman.
Yeah.
But we didn't have the movies. I mean, if you're coming now to watch movies, it's a total different game compared to comics.
Yeah, and I can understand that too. The book is always better than the movie, and I would guess that extends to comic books as well.
Yes.
Right,
and I'm just going to actually add to this a little bit, is that what's interesting is we have had a lot of people reach out, and there's an element that people would like to see the Action Bible in a movie sort of format and kind of thing. And, and we'd love to do it. But the interesting thing is we're staying true to a lot of the quote unquote, the brand of this product line and what it does as a resource to engage kids and families in the Word of God. So it's been interesting that it hasn't quite translated over to movies yet. Doesn't mean we won't try at some point.
Right.
But that's interesting, Sergio, when you say that. That
and
resonates with me.
Maintaining the quality of the word and the story in a movie presentation without it being distilled down or
well, and then you have to look at the budgets of a Avengers or Batman movie, and then you start to say, oh, maybe not.
And Mike,
I have to comment again, because Michelle, you're talking about movie animation or movie live action?
Yes.
We
are way out of our league here, Michelle.
How can we stay faithful to the Action Bible with a live action? I have no idea. How would that be?
Exactly.
Because talking about actors and settings, and then we would go. I would choose Mel Gibson to do the movie, but because he did a fantastic job.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
I think we're off track. I think we're off track.
It's because you're talking to a creative mind.
That's right.
And when you touch different buttons, that I see no comparison.
Right.
I have to make my point. Are we talking comics, animation, TV, live action? All of these are very different from each other. They're different animals, so to speak.
So you could probably do like this. You could probably do like the Spider-Man into the, what's it called? The Whataverse?
Into the Spider-Verse. Yeah.
Spider-Verse.
Which was a fantastic film. Yeah.
Yes. So that's sort of that's animated, but still very current and anyway,
that's another very controversial subject, because Spider-Verse is completely away from the Spider-Man that I grew up with.
Right.
And completely different from Stan Lee's creation and Steve Ditko's collaboration as an artist for the Spider-Man. Spider-Verse is an ultraverse type of thing that does not exist in my mind of continuity into the Stan Lee 1964 throughout today in comic book subjects. Totally different. Spider-Verse is aimed at diversity of today, but is not comparable to the original idea that Stan Lee made when he created Spider-Man that I read when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And I drew Spider-Man of Stan Lee, not the Spider-Verse version, which is a totally different world.
Right. Well, and it's just so cool to see how all those things
but when you talk about things that are very dear to me.
Oh, absolutely, man.
I cannot stay silent. I have to say
well, let's go ahead. We're going to go ahead and take a short break. We're going to get right back in on this, but we need to take a quick break, and we'll be right back on the Bible for Kids. Get swept away by God's awesome story with the Epic Bible. This graphic novel-style Bible features dramatic illustrations created by some of DC and Marvel's best comic book artists. Whether someone is reading the Bible for the first time or looking for a fresh perspective, The Epic Bible cinematic storytelling will make God's Word come alive and reveal His redemptive plan for all humanity. Perfect for teens, comic book fans, and graphic novel readers. The Epic Bible, God's Story from Eden to Eternity. Available for pre-order wherever books are sold.
Imagine a world where children of every hue know they are equally created in the image of God. This, friends, is God's heart revealed in His Word. A quote from Dorena Williamson. In her beautifully illustrated book, Colorful, author Dorena Williamson tells the story of two best friends who are learning to celebrate their different skin colors. As they look around them at the amazing colors in nature, they can see that their skin is another example of God's creativity. This joyful story takes a new approach to discussing race. Instead of being colorblind, we can choose to celebrate each color God gave us and be colorful instead. This book includes a parent connection, an easy tool to help you discuss the book's message with your child. You can also visit www.bhkids.com for a free, colorful, downloadable activity journal to help you and your kids grow deeper in your faith and understanding of kingdom diversity. Colorful is available wherever books are sold.
Hey, Bible for Kids listeners, we're always looking for ways to give away free resources for you to use with your kids. So look us up on social media and find out what's going on our Instagram and Facebook page at The Bible for Kids.
Welcome back to the Bible for Kids podcast, and we're speaking with Michelle and Sergio.
So, Sergio, you read the picture Bible, the original picture Bible that Michelle mentioned earlier. You read it during your childhood, which is such a cool full circle event. So what do you remember about that Bible, and why did it make such an impression on you?
You have to understand that when I was a kid, at 5, I already knew I wanted to do comic books.
Wow.
I was 5 years old, and I told my mom, I want to be a cartoonist. So I grew up reading comics. I devoured comics, not only from America, but from France, Asterix, and Tex from Italy as a Western comic. We had the picture Bible in Portuguese in booklets. It was 5 booklets published by David C. Cook in the 73, 74. I was not 5. I was already older, a little bit older. I was learning how to ride a bike. But to me, they were so small because they were 4x6 in size, black and white. But they were phenomenal to me as a young youth. I was not only dreaming of becoming a cartoonist, but I was thinking, because of my faith and upbringing, it would be so cool not only to draw comic book superheroes, but it would be so cool to be able to do something like this. So it was impacting to me because it was really well done from the standards of comic book quality, and even in a small version, black and white and translated, I loved it. I thought it was phenomenal.
So, Michelle, as you mentioned that you've been at Cook for 5 years, and then the Action Bible is 10 years old. Do you recall how David C. Cook linked up with Sergio and decided on Sergio as the artist for the Action Bible?
You know what? I actually am just going to have to say, Sergio, I'm not 100% clear on how they actually found you.
Yes, because of my faith. While I was at the Joe Kubert School in New Jersey, it was not New York, it was New Jersey, Dover, New Jersey. And we had a Christian teacher, Alex Stevens, and he had a book called Glory to God. And he asked me, Sergio, can you draw an illustration for my book? And I said, sure. And I drew Jesus carrying a huge cross over his shoulder. That illustration was used again in Proverbs and Parables publication and Comics 35 Ministries. 2 or 3 Christian publications that had my drawings of Proverbs and Parables and Jesus carrying the cross. in the time that Cook was looking for someone to revamp the picture Bible from the 70s, Bob DeLaPena was the art director, and Mary McNeil was with him. And they were somewhere where they had one of those books that published my Jesus Carrying the Cross. And when they looked through the drawings, they spotted my drawing, and they said, "I think we found our artist."
Wow.
So they emailed me and asked me if I wanted to do it. I said, sure. I didn't even know the details. I agreed right away. And I talked to them on the phone, and they gave me 2 weeks to do a 2-pager of David and Goliath tryout. Only pencils to submit in 2 weeks. The next day, I submitted pencils, inks, letters, and colors.
There you go. That's how you get a job.
And the way I did it was like this, because the story was so right on, based on the picture Bible. If you look at the original André LeBlanc, the original artist of the picture Bible from the 70s, that encounter of David and Goliath, he chose a point of view that, to me, based on my experience with Marvel and DC Comics, was not the most impactful way of presenting a giant against a young boy, because the artist chose a point of view where David was closer to us and the giant was in the background, very small.
Yeah.
And I looked at that and I said, "Woo, that's totally not narrative."
Right. You want to OTS on Goliath looking down at David.
Exactly. So that's exactly what I did. And Bob DeLaPena was so excited from my submission with Mary McNeil that they made a audio presentation with their voices over my drawings to the upper management at David C. Cook, telling them, "This is the guy we want," okay? Because they had told me, "Sergio, you were too quick. We have to wait for the other submissions to come in." But we are so excited for you that we made an audio with your drawings to submit to upper management to make sure that you are in.
That's great.
This is great. And Mike, I was just going to add that it is fun when I hear Sergio tell these stories, because I've heard about the impact and how literally he's right. The story is there was no one else. Once they saw Sergio's art, they just did have some, people they needed to weigh in on. And the other thing I'll add is that at that time, they weren't sure if the picture Bible was still going to be called the Picture Bible or was it going to get a new name. Sergio's art impacted the fact that the name did become the Action Bible. Yeah. Because he brought it to life with true action, not just in the way the illustrations are drawn and present and in the storyline, but also just because of its impact really to act on our faith.
Right. Oh, yeah. That's so great. And just, and choosing those perspectives, choosing those point of views really does a lot in storytelling to really add to the story. And so that's such an important that's such an important eye to have in choosing your framing.
And I would say even way before that Sergio was chosen to do this job, when because what are the chances of him reading the Picture Bible? It's in his childhood across the world, or I guess below, across the hemisphere anyway. Right. And what are the chances of that? And then him being so passionate about it, and about, him striking him, impacting him so powerfully. I think Sergio was probably chosen to illustrate this book when he was a little boy.
I 100% agree. I 100% agree, Amy. And that is one of the things that, again, inspires us and is a big part of the story, because Sergio's got a lot of fans and they reach out, and it's part of the story of, it was God ordained, but it's because it was Sergio's purpose, fulfilling of his calling. Yeah. And he got to marry everything that he does with his faith. And I know you guys have this Bible for Kids podcast, and the point of it, a lot of it it's for faith formation for a lifetime. Right. And when kids can be inspired to not only read the Bible, okay, and engage on their own, but know that they have a calling and they get to fulfill that. That's what all of this is about. That's my heartbeat anyway.
Yes. And it goes beyond just reading the Bible, but actually engaging with the Bible. So the action element of it is so important. And Sergio, I based today's scripture, our little verse of the day, on one of your quotes saying that the illustrations of the Action Bible are the result of your continuous walk with Christ. So tell us what you mean by that, and how did your walk, and we've heard a little bit about that so far, but how did your walk with Christ prepare you for this huge undertaking?
It begins in the mind of God, of course, because he thought of me and you and all of us before the foundation of the earth. And he prepared good works, drawing the Action Bible in the year 2006, before any of them came to be. He wrote my days, Psalm 139 and Ephesians. So God thought of me. He gave me gifts for him to glorify him. He made me be born where my mother, Celia, would bring me to church during Sunday school years as a kid. And he also determined that Word of Life would be involved in my life in Christian camps, and having enough counselors concerned about my eternity and asking me, what would happen if you died today? Would you go to heaven? And 1979, I wanted to make sure, and that's the year that I committed my life to Christ. And growing up, not only going to Christian camp and going to church, but also having a personal relationship at home where I would open the Bible and grab its spiritual food to my nourishment as a young, born-again believer in Jesus Christ and follower of the carpenter. I grew up reading the Bible. I grew up going to church. I grew up composing music, leading worship and ministries in every church that I attended, being part of Christian bands, Christian choirs, and just a relationship that is nurtured by reading of his word, putting the word into practice. Whenever I worked, I learned if you do anything as if you're working for God, then you do your best. And God is your ultimate boss, no matter where you do and where you are. If you learn the principles from the Bible, then you will bear fruit in its proper time. You will be like a tree planted by the waters, fruitful, seasonal, on its time, compacted with trials and growth along the way as well. So God prepared me for this job because he picked me from the beginning, and then he trained me as I was growing up with pains and sliding away a bit, but coming back. But that relationship prepared me to do something like you already agreed with me that God intended to happen in the beginning. And then it's just a fruit of a walk throughout the years.
Okay, listeners, we are having so much fun talking with Michelle and Sergio about the Action Bible that we're actually going to continue this episode to next week. So join us next week for the next half of our discussion about the Action Bible.
And listeners, you know we're always giving away free stuff on social media, so don't forget to follow us on Instagram or Facebook, or at the Bible for Kids on our website at thebibleforkids.com.
Thanks for listening to the Bible for Kids podcast with Amy Parker and Mike Naraki. Be sure to connect with the Bible for Kids on Instagram and Facebook, and at thebibleforkids.com. We'd love to hear your comments and ideas for future podcasts. You can email us, info@thebibleforkids.com. The Bible for Kids podcast is part of the Way Nation Podcast Network. Find more podcasts at waynation.com.